You are standing in a country that should have disappeared. Not because it is small. Not because it is weak. But because history has spent thousands of years testing whether it could endure at all. This is Armenia, a landlocked country in the South Caucasus, wedged between larger powers, mountain-locked, stormed by conquerors, broken by empires, and still unmistakably itself. Most people know the name, but only dimly. A place somewhere near Europe, somewhere near Asia, somewhere inside a long memory of churches, mountains, war, and exile. A place they pass over conceptually, the way aircraft cross cloud cover without seeing the landscape beneath. But Armenia is not an in-between place. It is not a margin. It is not an afterthought between continents. It is one of the oldest continuously inhabited civilizations on Earth. A country where kingdoms rose before many modern nations can trace even the beginning of their identity. A place where stone has been used not just to build, but to remember. Where language itself became a fortress. Where faith became state policy before most of the world had decided what states even were. Where manuscripts survived invasions. Where monasteries were built on cliffs not because it was convenient, but because a civilization learned long ago that survival often requires altitude. Armenia does not overwhelm you with scale. It does something more difficult. It unsettles your sense of time. The roads twist past Soviet blocks, apricot stands, canyon walls, and villages where laundry dries beneath mountains older than recorded history. In the capital, cafes are full, jazz moves through summer evenings, and the city glows pink at sunset because its volcanic tuff absorbs light as if architecture itself had been taught how to blush. Outside the city, the earth opens into ravines, climbs into high grasslands, and rises toward monasteries so improbably placed they look less constructed than revealed. And over all of it, whether visible or not, there is the constant presence of something larger than geography. Memory. Armenia is a country that remembers with discipline. It remembers through prayer, through food, through stone carving, through song, through names carried across oceans by a diaspora larger than the population inside the republic itself. It remembers what was lost. It remembers what was built. It remembers what nearly vanished. And because it remembers, it remains. Before we go into the monasteries, the mountains, the blue lake at altitude, the cave where wine was being made before much of the ancient world had learned to write, there are 3 facts you need to hear first. Because they change everything. They change how you see this country. They change how you place it in history. And once you understand them, Armenia stops looking like a small state on a modern map and starts looking like what it actually is. A civilization that refused to be erased. In the year 301, according to Armenian tradition, a kingdom made a decision that would define its identity for the next 17 centuries. Armenia adopted Christianity as a state religion before Rome did. Before the great cathedrals of Western Europe. Before Christianity became an imperial language of power across continents. Long before bells and domes and incense would define the visual vocabulary of Christendom, Armenia had already placed the cross at the center of statehood. This was not a minor religious adjustment. It was civilizational. King Tiridates III and Gregory the Illuminator did not simply change the rituals of a court. They altered the symbolic architecture of an entire nation. Temples gave way to churches. Sacred geography was rewritten. Valleys, ridges, and urban centers that had once belonged to older systems of belief were absorbed into a new spiritual order that would become inseparable from Armenian identity itself. And identity mattered here in a way it did not have to matter for larger empires. Empires can afford cultural looseness because they possess mass, armies, buffer zones, and room for forgetting. Smaller civilizations surrounded by stronger neighbors cannot afford that luxury. They survive by defining themselves clearly enough that conquest cannot dissolve them. Christianity in Armenia became more than faith. It became continuity. It became a language of endurance. A liturgy of national survival. The monastery walls scattered across the Armenian highlands are not just religious structures. They are declarations written in stone: we are still here, we know who we are, and we have not confused ourselves with those who came to rule us. That is why Armenian churches feel different. Not merely old. Necessary. Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, was founded in 782 BCE. That date matters not because age itself is glamorous, but because it rearranges assumptions. Rome, the city people instinctively associate with civilizational antiquity, was founded later. Yerevan was already there when Rome had not yet become Rome. Already named. Already fortified. Already attached to a political order. The origins of Yerevan are tied to the fortress of Arabuni, established by King Arjishti I of Urartu on a hill overlooking the Ararat plain. It was a strategic decision, as founding cities usually are. Control the land. Watch the routes. Project power. Make permanence visible. And permanence is exactly what followed. Yerevan today is not a museum city fossilized under glass. It is not a preserved ruin pretending to be a capital. It is a living, restless city of traffic, music, concrete, Soviet inheritance, post-Soviet reinvention, and deep, almost geological memory. That combination is what makes it unusual. Ancient foundation. Modern pulse. A city that has been rebuilt so many times it no longer performs age theatrically. It carries it the way mountains carry snow, without explanation. When you walk through Yerevan, you are not always looking at the oldest layers. Much of what is visible is 20th century. But that is the point. The city does not need every century to remain standing above ground in order to prove continuity. The continuity is in the site, in the name, in the line that runs from Arabuni to Yerevan through conquest, kingdom, empire, republic, collapse, and renewal. Age here is not decorative. It is structural. In the early 5th century, Mesrop Mashtots created the Armenian alphabet. 36 letters at its birth, later expanded, designed not for artistic novelty but for cultural preservation. A script built so that sacred texts could be translated, theology could be taught, literature could be fixed in written form, and a people positioned between great imperial languages would not lose themselves inside someone else's words. Few inventions reveal the psychology of a civilization more clearly than the invention of a script. An alphabet is never only a technical tool. It is a decision about what deserves permanence. It is an answer to the question, what must not be left vulnerable to translation through foreign power? Armenia's answer was everything. The Bible was translated. Scholarship flourished. Histories were recorded. Manuscripts were copied in monasteries perched above ravines and snow lines. Language was given architecture. It could now survive beyond the breath of the speaker. Beyond the destruction of a village. Beyond the death of a generation. That matters even more in Armenia because the country's history is also the history of dispersal. Armenians did not remain only in Armenia. They moved, fled, traded, rebuilt, and formed communities across the Middle East, Europe, Russia, and the Americas. The alphabet traveled with them. Not just as writing, but as continuity compact enough to fit inside prayer books, school primers, inscriptions, gravestones, and memory. Some countries are preserved by mountains. Some by armies. Some by wealth. Armenia was preserved in part by letters. Stone churches. An ancient capital. An alphabet built as defense. Now the country begins to come into focus. So let's go deeper. Markets sell dried fruit, herbs, copperware, books, old cameras, carpets, and Soviet artifacts with the casual abundance of a place long used to trade. Cafes stay full. The soundscape shifts from church bells to car horns to clinking glasses to children in the plazas long after dark. Yerevan is not solemn all the time. That is one of its strengths. A country this historically burdened has not surrendered joy. Yet beneath the daily life lies the older city, the deeper city, the original act of founding. Arabuni Fortress still stands on Aaron Bird Hill, fragmentary but undeniable. From there you can look outward and understand the decision made nearly 2,800 years ago. This was a place to command a plain, secure a frontier, and anchor a kingdom. The surviving inscriptions, the mud brick remnants, the plan of the ancient citadel, all of it makes clear that Yerevan did not emerge accidentally from trade routes and village clustering. It was founded with intention. That intention has never entirely left. Even today Yerevan feels like a city aware of its own symbolic role. Not just an administrative capital, but a civilizational vessel. A place expected to carry more memory than its avenues should logically be able to hold. You can feel it at dawn when the streets are still quiet and Mount Ararat is blue with distance. You can feel it at night when the fountains in Republic Square rise through music and light and families gather not as spectators, but as participants in a public life repeatedly interrupted by history and repeatedly restored. Yerevan is older than Rome, but it does not behave like an antique. It behaves like a survivor. There are places where a country's spiritual history can be summarized in one sentence. For Armenia, that place is Echmiadzin. The name is often translated as, the descent of the only begotten, rooted in the vision that, according to tradition, showed Gregory the Illuminator where the first cathedral should stand. Whether heard as literal revelation or sacred national memory, the meaning is clear enough. This is not just a church site. This is the place where Armenian Christianity became visible in stone. The Mother See of Holy Echmiadzin is central not only to the Armenian Apostolic Church, but to the Armenian idea of continuity itself. This is where the country's status as the first Christian state stops being an abstract historical claim and becomes architecture, ritual, hierarchy, liturgy, and space. The complex carries centuries of rebuilding, restoration, invasion, damage, and preservation, because in Armenia holy places do not enjoy the luxury of untouched survival. They survive by being repaired. That is a distinction worth understanding. In some civilizations, sacred buildings endure because history leaves them alone. In Armenia, sacred buildings endure because people refuse to abandon them, even after history has struck them repeatedly. Walk through Echmiadzin and you feel that layered persistence everywhere. The stones do not belong to one uninterrupted moment. They belong to an accumulation of devotion. Early foundations, medieval interventions, later additions, restorations after earthquakes, reconsecrations after political upheaval. The site is old, but more importantly, it is continuously claimed. And that continuity radiates outward. Priests in black robes move through courtyards with the controlled rhythm of ritual institutions older than many states. Pilgrims stand in silence. Visitors look upward, perhaps first at the dome, then at the paintings, then at the improbable fact that a Christian ecclesiastical center was functioning here while much of Europe was still centuries away from its own medieval religious maturity. This is where Armenia's difference becomes concrete. Because Christianity here did not arrive as one layer among many in a stable civilizational sequence. It arrived and became the sequence. It shaped literature, law, art, calendar, architecture, education, identity. To understand Armenia without understanding this transformation would be to study a cathedral by examining only the doors. And Echmiadzin is not isolated in that role. Nearby lie the churches and ruins that deepen the story, Svartnots. They tell you not only what existed, but what had to withstand disappearance in order to remain visible at all. The Armenian plateau is scattered with monasteries, but Echmiadzin is different. It is not simply one beautiful site among many. It is a point of origin in the national imagination. A country adopted a faith. A faith became a civilizational framework. And that framework became strong enough to outlast dynasties, invasions, ideological programs, and the modern politics of borders. At Echmiadzin, you can feel the scale of that decision. A kingdom changed its religion. And in doing so, it changed the shape of itself. High above sea level, far from any coastline, Armenia contains something that feels almost impossible. A sea in the mountains. Lake Sevan is one of the great high-altitude freshwater lakes of the region, a vast body of blue held inside a ring of uplands, weather, and silence. On maps it appears like an inland accident. In person it feels essential. Not just geographically, but emotionally. Armenia is a country of stone, ravines, and hard verticality. Sevan interrupts that severity with expanse. The first impression is scale. You arrive by road and the water does not behave like a lake in the ordinary imagination. It behaves like distance itself. The horizon opens. Light scatters differently. Wind has room to gather. The surface shifts from steel to cobalt to impossible silver depending on weather and hour. In a landlocked country, Sevan produces the psychological effect of maritime space. That matters more than statistics ever can. It changes how the body understands the landscape. For Armenians, Sevan is not merely scenic. It is intimate. A place of summer escape, of childhood memory, of fish, of monastery views, of family weekends, of cold water and changing light. National landmarks become truly important not when they dominate postcards, but when they enter private life. Sevan has done that. And yet it also carries history at every edge. On a peninsula that was once an island before water levels changed stands Savannahbank, the monastic complex of dark stone against one of the bluest backdrops in the country. The contrast is almost theatrical, black volcanic church against luminous water and open sky. From a distance the churches look austere, nearly severe. Up close they become more human, worn by centuries of weather, prayer, neglect, preservation, and return. Monasteries in Armenia often occupy dramatic sites, but Savannahbank does something slightly different. Instead of using altitude to dominate a gorge or defend a pass, it uses exposure. Wind, horizon, openness. It stands where land yields to water and where contemplation is shaped not by enclosure, but by vastness. There is an Armenian genius for this kind of placement. Choosing exactly the point where a structure will speak most powerfully with the landscape around it. Sevan also tells a more modern story, one less romantic and more political. Human intervention altered the lake in the 20th century, lowering its level through water management and creating ecological consequences that later generations had to confront. Armenia, like every modern state, does not inherit paradise unchanged. It inherits systems that must be managed, repaired, argued over, protected. Sevan is beautiful, but it is also instructive. Even the most beloved landscape can be damaged by ambition that underestimates consequence. Still, the lake endures with extraordinary visual authority. At sunrise the water can look pale and metallic. By afternoon it hardens into blue so saturated it appears almost painted. By evening the mountains gather shadow and the monasteries darken further against the glow. Voices on the shore become quieter. Restaurants fill with grilled fish, bread, herbs, and apricots in season. Families linger. The light drains slowly because high places often seem to negotiate differently with the end of day. Lake Sevan is Armenia at its most expansive. Not the Armenia of tight canyons and defensive peaks, but the Armenia that opens. A country known for endurance also needs breath. Sevan is that breath. Some monasteries seem to belong to history. Tatev seems to belong to altitude itself. It stands in southern Armenia above the Verotan Gorge, on a basalt plateau cut off by depth, distance, and the kind of landscape that makes human construction feel simultaneously heroic and improbable. To reach it is to understand why Armenians built sacred institutions where they did. Not merely for beauty, though beauty is everywhere here. Not merely for protection, though protection mattered. But because remoteness can become a theology. You approach Tatev and the land begins to fall away with increasing seriousness. Valleys turn into gorges. Roads coil. Space becomes vertical. Then comes one of the strangest transitions in modern travel, the wings of Tatev, the aerial tramway crossing the void in near silence, carrying visitors above the canyon toward a medieval monastery that once required far more arduous arrival. Technology has shortened the journey, but it has not reduced the drama of the site. If anything, it has made the topography more legible. Suspended above the gorge, you understand the scale of the isolation. And isolation was an asset. Tatev was not simply a monastery in the devotional sense. It was a major intellectual center, a place of scholarship, manuscript production, theology, philosophy. In Armenia, monasteries were often universities before universities. They stored thought as well as prayer. That matters because it explains why so many were built in places that seem inaccessible. The point was not withdrawal from civilization. The point was preservation of civilization under conditions where central authority was fragile and external threat was constant. At Tatev, that logic becomes physical. The complex itself is built in stone that seems drawn directly from the plateau it occupies. Churches, walls, courtyards, rooflines, kochkars, those intricately carved Armenian cross stones, everything feels aligned with the terrain. The wind moves through the site as if it has known these walls for centuries. It has. Look outward and the gorge does most of the narration for you. Layered cliffs, shadowed folds, occasional villages far below, slopes changing color under weather. This is a place that teaches scale without spectacle. It does not need to shout. The drop is enough. And then there is the bell tower, the churches, the monastic order of the space itself. Even after invasions, earthquakes, and the long interruptions of history, Tatev still communicates authority. Not imperial authority. Something more disciplined than that. Cultural authority. The authority of a civilization that learned to move its most valuable things, books, liturgy, learning, memory, into places that could not be easily overrun. That is one of Armenia's great historical instincts. When vulnerability is permanent, preservation becomes strategic. Tatev is also emotionally different from Echmiadzin. Echmiadzin feels central, institutional, foundational. Tatev feels exposed, remote, hard-won. One speaks in the voice of a spiritual capital. The other in the voice of a citadel of thought at the edge of the world. When clouds move over the gorge, the entire scene can change in minutes. Sun on one ridge. Shadow on another. The monastery bright, then dark, then bright again. Light in Armenia is rarely passive. It reveals and withdraws. It lets the landscape keep some of its mystery. Tatev has survived because Armenians kept returning to it. That may be the simplest and most important sentence. Not because it was easy to reach. Because it was worth reaching. Before kingdoms recorded treaties here, before monasteries copied gospels, before capitals rose and fell and empires drafted borders across the highlands, people in what is now Armenia were already making wine. That is not a metaphor. It is archaeology. In the Arini, one cave complex, in Armenia's Vayoz-Dzor region, evidence was found of winemaking dating back more than 6,000 years. A press. Vessels. Traces of grapes. The material logic of fermentation preserved long enough for the modern world to rediscover what ancient life here already knew: this land and the vine have known each other for a very long time. That discovery matters for more than novelty. Oldest winery makes a good headline, but the deeper importance is what it reveals about settled life, ritual, agriculture, and continuity in this region. Wine does not emerge from accident alone. It emerges from knowledge. Cultivation, harvest timing, pressing, storing, remembering which methods work, transmitting that knowledge. In other words, culture. And culture in Armenia is often older than outsiders expect by orders of magnitude. Armenia itself sits in a landscape that feels precisely suited to this story. Dry slopes, canyon-light, hard ridgelines, vineyards holding onto the land with deliberate tenacity. Vayoz-Dzor is not lush in the soft European sense. It is dramatic, mineral, exacting. Vines here do not suggest abundance without effort. They suggest the opposite. That some of the most enduring pleasures in human life are produced under pressure. There is a reason that resonates in Armenia. The cave where the winery was found is also a reminder that ancient life survives not only in monumental architecture. Sometimes it survives in containers, pits, fragments, seeds, residue. Civilizations are often reconstructed through their smallest remains. What people stored. What they drank. What they buried. What they considered worthy of repeating. Wine in Armenia today is not just an archaeological afterglow. It is a living tradition experiencing revival and reinterpretation. Indigenous grape varieties, village production, modern wineries, export ambitions, tasting rooms framed by mountains and monasteries, ancient prestige has become contemporary possibility. But what gives Armenian wine its emotional force is that it is not pretending to invent a heritage. The heritage was already there, under the ground. And there is something deeply Armenian about that. The revelation that the past is not lost, only waiting in stone and dust for the right excavation. Arini also complicates simplistic narratives of the ancient world. Too often people imagine cultural sophistication as moving in one direction from a few recognized centers outward. But the South Caucasus has always been part of deeper, older human networks than many popular histories allow. Trade, cultivation, metallurgy, migration, belief, these lands were not peripheral spectators to civilization. They participated in its making. Stand in Vayoz-Dzor in late afternoon and the slopes turn amber and rust. The vineyards darken. The air cools faster than you expect. Villages seem to draw inward toward evening. Somewhere nearby there is almost certainly bread, herbs, cheese, fruit, and wine on a table, because in Armenia hospitality is rarely ornamental. It is practiced. And perhaps that too belongs in this story. The oldest winery is not interesting only because it is old. It is interesting because it reveals how long Armenians and their ancestors have been turning landscape into culture, harvest into ritual, and survival into something finer than mere endurance. They were making wine here before history had learned how to describe them. Say the word Armenia and most people imagine stone, mountain ridges, treeless heights, monasteries against severe landscapes, summer heat rising from volcanic earth. And all of that is true. But then you drive north into Dilijan and the country changes its face. Forests close in. The air softens. Hills become green in a way many first-time visitors do not associate with Armenia at all. Beach, oak, meadow, mist, mineral springs, moss-dark trunks after rain. The roads through Tavash province move through an Armenia that feels less austere and more hidden, as if the country kept this version of itself in reserve for those willing to go further. Dilijan is often called Armenian Switzerland, a comparison people reach for whenever mountains and greenery coincide. The phrase is convenient and not entirely wrong, but it misses something essential. Dilijan is not valuable because it resembles somewhere else. It is valuable because it expands Armenia's own emotional range. This is the Armenia of forest monasteries, of hiking paths, of wooden balconies, of water in the air, of morning fog clinging low over slopes before lifting into sunlight. A place where the architecture of contemplation changes with the ecology around it. Haghartson Monastery sits among the trees with the kind of composure that Armenian sacred architecture often achieves. No need for excess. No need for monumental theatrics. The stone walls, conical domes, and carved details belong to the forest without dissolving into it. They remain distinct, disciplined, almost severe, while the woods around them provide softness and depth. That tension is beautiful. Armenian monasteries do not imitate nature sentimentally. They set themselves against it in precise balance. Further north, the great monastic complexes of Hagpat and Sanahin in Lori speak in an even older architectural language of scholarship, faith, and kingdom. These UNESCO-recognized sites are among the highest expressions of medieval Armenian religious architecture, but even that description is too technical to capture their atmosphere. They feel like places where thought once had mass. Where manuscripts, theology, music, mathematics, and memory accumulated in stone precincts surrounded by mountain weather. Armenia's monasteries were never only devotional stations. They were knowledge systems. That truth becomes especially vivid in the north, where terrain, weather, and distance make clear how deliberate their placement was. These were not decorative buildings added to a secure landscape. They were institutions of continuity in a region that knew insecurity very well. Dilijan itself, as a town, carries another kind of mood, part resort, part small cultural refuge, part breathing space from Yerevan. The old center has wooden verandas and a softer scale, while newer life moves around it with the usual Armenian mix of pragmatism and warmth. People come for the forests, the lake nearby, the trails, the monasteries, the cooler air. They also come because Dilijan offers something psychologically rare in this part of the world, a sense of shelter created by trees rather than walls. And that matters. Countries are not only defined by their monuments. They are defined by the landscapes in which people recover. The north of Armenia is where recovery feels possible. Not because history is absent there. It is not. But because the forests modulate its weight. Rain on leaves instead of wind on stone. Green valleys instead of exposed plateaus. Hidden monasteries instead of skyline silhouettes. Another register of the same civilization. This is what overlooked countries do to you when you stay with them long enough. They refuse simplification. Armenia is not only canyon and church, memory and basalt. It is also forest, mist, and quiet. There are mountains that dominate a landscape. And then there are mountains that dominate a people's imagination so completely that political It would be easy to make Armenia only a country of memory. Only monasteries. Only trauma. Only mountain light on old stone. That would be a mistake. Because Armenia is also doing what enduring civilizations eventually must do if they intend to remain alive rather than merely venerable, it is translating inheritance into future form. Few symbols express this better than the art from the Armenian alphabet to the contemporary technology sector. Begin at the Mount Ararat in Yerevan, the repository of ancient manuscripts and one of the most intellectually important institutions in the country. The building itself carries solemnity, but what matters most is what it protects: handwritten gospels, chronicles, works of philosophy, medicine, theology, science, literature. Centuries of thought copied and preserved through wars, migrations, dynastic collapse, imperial rule, and ideological campaigns that might easily have destroyed them. The Mount Ararat is proof that Armenians long ago understood knowledge as something that must be physically defended. Books here are not casual possessions. They are rescued continuity. Now move forward in time. In the modern republic, Armenia has developed a reputation as a place of education, engineering talent, mathematics, chess culture, startups, and technical ambition disproportionate to its size. Innovation centers, software firms, design studios, and educational programs such as TUMO have become part of the country's contemporary identity. Young Armenians are learning animation, coding, robotics, design, filmmaking, and digital tools in a nation better known abroad for monasteries and memory. That contrast is real, but it is not a contradiction. It is a continuation. An alphabet was once created so a civilization could preserve itself in writing. Now that same civilizational instinct appears in code, hardware, engineering, and digital education. The medium changed. The underlying impulse did not. Armenia has always had to compensate for scale with intelligence. That is true militarily, culturally, economically, and intellectually. Countries with large populations and vast resources can survive mediocrity for longer. Countries like Armenia cannot. They need excellence concentrated enough to matter. The manuscript tradition was one expression of that. The scientific and technological ambitions of the present are another. Walk through modern Yerevan and the evidence is subtle but visible. Students carrying laptops under statues of poets. Startup conversations in cafes not far from churches older than many nation-states. International diasporic networks feeding investment, mentorship, return visits, collaboration. A cultural memory of literacy evolving into a contemporary respect for technical fluency. This is not to romanticize the challenges. Armenia faces serious pressures, geopolitical, economic, demographic. The future is not guaranteed here any more than the past was. But that uncertainty is precisely what gives the country's forward movement its tension and dignity. Armenia is not innovating from a position of careless abundance. It is innovating from a history that has taught the cost of dependency, the vulnerability of isolation, and the necessity of making the mind a strategic resource. That is why the image matters. Ancient letters carved in stone monuments. Young people writing code in a 21st century lab. 15 centuries between them. Same civilizational logic. Preserve what matters. Learn faster than your size should allow. Build continuity in forms that can survive the next disruption. Armenia's future, if it succeeds, will not look like a rejection of its past. It will look like the alphabet becoming electricity. Armenia is a small country by modern measure. But modern measure is the wrong instrument. You do not understand Armenia by area. You do not understand it by population. You do not understand it by treating it as a minor state on the map between larger powers whose names dominate headlines. You understand it by duration. By the fact that kingdoms existed here deep in antiquity and that the civilizational line did not fully break. By the fact that Christianity became state identity here before much of the Christian world existed in recognizable form. By the fact that an alphabet was invented because survival required language to become permanent. By the fact that monasteries were placed on cliffs, in forests, beside lakes, and above gorges not merely to honor God, but to protect memory. By the fact that wine was being made here 6,000 years ago. By the fact that a mountain outside the border still rules the nation's emotional horizon. By the fact that catastrophe did not end the people it intended to erase. By the fact that manuscripts survived, and now code is being written in their wake. This is a country that has learned the hardest lesson geography can teach. That being exposed is not the same as being finished. Armenia has been invaded, partitioned, absorbed, targeted, displaced, mourned, romanticized, and misunderstood. Still, it remains one of the clearest examples on earth of how civilization can persist when empire does not, when borders shift, when institutions collapse, when grief becomes generational and still does not consume the entire future. The churches are still there. The alphabet is still there. The mountain is still there. The lake, the caves, the manuscripts, the memorial flame, the city older than Rome, the monastery above the gorge, the vineyards in Vayo's Zor, the children walking through Yerevan with the future in their hands, all of it is still there. And that may be the most astonishing thing about Armenia. Not that it is ancient. Not that it is beautiful. Not even that it has suffered. But that after everything, it remains recognizably itself. A nation of stone and script. Of grief and intelligence. Of mountains, monasteries, memory, and reinvention. A country that did not survive by accident. A country that survived on purpose. And once you see that, Armenia is impossible to overlook again.